So I'm absolutely delighted this is happening this week and not last week. So I'm going to tell you a little story before I introduce our wonderful guest here. Last week, as we talk about International Women's Day, I want us to reflect on those brilliant women that we have in our lives, whether they be partners, mothers, colleagues, bosses, anyone that we have in our lives who are wonderful. And I'm going to tell you about my wife, who is wonderful. So a little bit of audience participation. Let's have a bit of panto, if you don't mind. So if you're at a pantomime, you'll do a nice wee, or a boo, or maybe an ah. But my wife, she left me last week. Thank you. Well done. You're well trained. It was only for 1.5 days.
Yay!
Yeah. Excellent. And it was only temporary, so I'm told. Excellent. But it was an interesting reflection because I'm very privileged. She's got a job, she's got a business. We've got a very strange setup at home. Not in that way. It's lots of animals. We've got alpacas, pigs, goats, too many cats to count. When they're in double figures, you don't tell people because they think you're, and some dogs too. But so I had to do everything that day. And I became a terrible husband. I became a terrible father. I became terrible at work. And it was a moment for me to reflect on a woman who was in my life. As a partnership, we are quite good together. As individuals, we are terrible. So that's my little story, and I wanted just to reflect on the women in our lives before we introduce our great guest. So a round of applause for the women in our lives. And now I'm going to introduce Saleha, who's got an amazing background. When I think about how I introduce her, it makes me sound like some kind of WWF introduction expert. But FT, BAME Leader of the Year.
Top 100.
Top 100, sorry, I've already promoted you.
And with
a couple in here, I know.
As well.
Which we won't name. Well, we will name. And also like an MBA, Masters in Positive Psychology.
Positive Psychology.
And works happily for one of our great partners at Acceleration, where she's leading the Google relationship. So there's so much to love about her. But she's also a champion of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Has been doing this for a long time. So she's
a long time.
Well, you said 30 years.
Yes.
So we're here to learn. Wow. Yes. Wow. Here to learn from your wonderful experiences. So first and foremost, what is that psychology degree you did, which was positive psychology, not negative psychology? What's the difference?
Exactly. So I think, first of all, it's important to say that I am like you. I am a businesswoman, a leader within Acceleration. We focus on technology. And my role is looking after our Google relationship and running the Google consultancy. So I'm not a psychologist or a coach. I've done a classic business technology background, but I decided to do a positive psychology master's degree about 2.5 years ago, on top of the job and husband and family and travel and all of that, because I wanted to understand how we use our brain within our jobs, within our career, and especially as women. So the concept of positive psychology is if you take a scale where 0 is neutral, and minus on that scale in medical psychological terms is anxiety, stress, leading to things like PTSD and very sort of deep mental negative situations that you're dealing with medically. If you come back to the neutral position, positive psychology is a newer strain of psychology that's been around for around 25 years, so very new. But it focuses on how do we activate our minds and our brains on a psychological, neurological level to increase our productivity, our creativity, engagement, confidence, self-esteem. So how do we become the most optimal human beings we can be that makes us feel happy, engaged, involved, and that side of positive psychological well-being?
Interesting. And when you think about it, so I've listened to your podcast and I've read some of your bits and pieces, and the thing that really stood out for me was this concept that like your success depends, and maybe I'll get my language wrong here, so don't shout me down, but your success depends on your DNA, like what you've got, what you're born with, luck,
Yep.
and then how you drive yourself forward in the world and how you experience the world. I'd love to find out a bit more about that and how much luck I may have had along the way.
So without being too academic about it, because for me this is around how do we use this every day, not as, I'm not an academic that talks about this in scientific terms, but research shows that as a human being, we are made up of 40% of our DNA that is pretty much set when we are born. Now, there's various arguments around that in the scientific world, but you're made up of, you are male or female or whichever country you're born in and how that affects you genetically, for example. So 40% is genetics. 40% is what we choose to influence ourselves. So our life choices, whether that's our relationships, our career, what we do, how our life spans out, can be influenced by up to 40%. And then research shows that the remaining 20% is kind of luck or chance or, sort of not everything's set and you can't influence absolutely everything. So the point is at least 40% of our life choices, our career, etc., can be influenced by us as individuals.
And when did you first notice your ability to make that influence? When did that trigger happen in your life?
I think I was very young, and that's why I wanted to understand from a psychological, medical perspective what the thinking is behind this. I was around 14 when I was at that stage in school where I knew I wanted to go into media. And I didn't know it was media technology then, because this is a long time ago. But I wanted to be in the media world. And so from the very start, when you're choosing your options, which subjects you choose to do at school, even before you get to college or university, I was adamant I wanted to be in media, and I wanted to be a businesswoman. At the time, I wanted to run ICI. That was my ambition.
I'm not going to tell you what I wanted to be at 14, what I was doing for that matter. I was not that switched on.
I think I was influenced by TV in that I was watching Dynasty.
I was influenced by my mother, who was a heavy smoker and a heavy drinker.
Okay.
That's the other woman in my life.
Well, I think what's important to sort of point out here is that I didn't have the seamless start to my career that you may think I had. Listening to me, and this is very important in terms of perception of people and how they look, sound, etc. I was put into foster care at the age of 18 months. So I grew up, my childhood was in the UK social system, and I bounced around different homes and environments, and it was pretty bad. It was really bad. So much so that I ran away from the home I was in when I was 16, after I finished my last O-level. So I went in and did, and I remember it being maths, going in, finishing the O-level, and this goes back to that intention. You asked how young was I. I knew that I had to get my education at secondary school, high school level to be able to continue that if I wanted to go into a business career. So I was very, very young, but it wasn't until I was talking to a counsellor about the issues that I dealt with in my childhood. And she said to me something that always stuck, and this was when I was around 19, 20. And she said, what is it that gave you that drive or that determination to go into a career when, given your background, you could have easily have become a statistic, which is not where I am today. And that sort of got me thinking about what is it that we think about, or what can we influence? And rather than that just being my opinion or my own experience, I then wanted to do the neuroscience psychological degree, where you can physically and mentally prove why you think the way you do, how you can change the way you think, and therefore influence your life.
Interesting. And when we think about diversity inclusion, we've got some fabulous programs here, the Inclusivity Bingo, I Am Remarkable. We're very lucky to work in a company that has got so much support on the topic.
Very much so.
Increasingly, in my world and with my team, and I can see a few of them here today, and if I sort of characterize how we're doing on this topic in our teams around effort and achievement, I think actually we are trying really hard.
Yeah.
We're not always getting where we want to get to. And the way to view it is that we need to weave it into every kind of conversation and every thought and every decision that we make. And it's not about one thing or one initiative. No disrespect to the one things and the one initiatives.
Yeah.
How do you view the topic?
It's interesting because as we were talking before we came on stage, when you go back to the premise that International Women's Day started in 1908, the challenges facing women then are very different to obviously what we face today. However, how we deal with that as a human, how we deal with challenge, the principle is still the same. Whether it's the stress of how do you club a mammoth back in caveman days to get food and survive, to how do you deal with 50 million emails a day and 3 time zones and what, it's the premise of how do we actually deal with that. And so what I have found through the research I've done on the psychology side is that if we intentionally focus on being more inclusive and we put that thinking into our everyday work, we're able to be more inclusive because you're looking at it as a habit within your work. So it's similar to going to the gym where, we all set our intentions at the beginning of the year. I'm going to go to the gym, I'm going to lose weight, I'm one of them, et cetera, et cetera. And then work kicks in and suddenly, we don't have a gym like you have here. I know you're all fit and lovely because you're in the gym every day. But it's that habit of if you go to the gym, once you start forming that habit, then you wake up and you go, yeah, I need to go to the gym, or I'm going to be in the gym at lunchtime, or I'm scheduling it as part of my actual day. What we've learned through the neuroscience side is you can do the same with your brain in terms of how you think about inclusivity and how you then bring that into how you operate on a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, yearly
So how do
basis.
I train my brain?
So what we have to understand, there's a lot of talk around training the brain as a muscle. What a lot of people don't realize is that the brain is not just one thing. The brain is made up of 86 billion neurons, neurocells that affect our whole physiology. So within your brain, in the same way you could if you went to the gym, you can train for your abs or train for your arms or whatever part of the body particularly you want to focus on. You can do the same in your brain around specific areas, whether that is attention, focus, memory, emotion, confidence, self-esteem, engagement. So what you then have to get to is, what is it that I want to focus on, and where do I then start playing that into my everyday life? So do I want to focus on self-esteem, for example? Am I feeling, I want to increase my confidence? How do I do that for myself as an individual? And how do I do that in an environment that is more inclusive? And think intentionally about how you're going to do that. So it doesn't just become something that happens, or you think about when you're in an initiative or a training program. You're actually intentionally setting out to behave like that in the first place.
And so the next step, if I follow that logic through, is that we have these skills and the brain is divided up into these almost like different muscles, parts of the muscle. What happens when we're in an environment where we are uncomfortable and we're not feeling included and we are not using the right part of the muscle to get the conclusion that we'd like?
A human being, whether it's male, female, whatever gender, will shrink away and retract within an environment where they don't feel included, supported, and engaged. A human being that is being given the opportunity to be stretched, and I know you have a stretch program here, to be stretched and to feel part of something will give so much more. And that happens on an unconscious level. And this is the point that we're making with the neuroscience and the inclusivity, is that sometimes you do that where you have a really good day, or you have a really good meeting, or a really good client meeting where you're going, wow, we've won that piece of work, or we've just delivered this as a team, and you feel fantastic. But what's actually happened is that in that process, to get to that, people have felt engaged and part of it. So they're giving it energy, they're giving it attention and focus.
Yeah.
And what we want to get to is a stage where you're intentionally setting out to do that and replicate that feeling, rather than just it happens and you realise afterwards that it's happened.
And so again, following that logic through, imagine we're trying to build diverse teams. Traditionally, we see it in the more traditional lenses, male, female, etc., etc. How do you build teams that have that diversity of those muscles, and how do you look at building those teams, and what happens when you get it right and what happens when you don't?
I think it's building on particularly what Google do very well, which is looking at, do we have a good mix of male, female, minority groups, or whatever different nationalities you want to. Let's build on top of that, and on a psychological level, look at the values and strengths from a psychological lens of the individuals involved. So if you look at something, and you can Google this, it's free to do and simple to do, something called the VIA, and it's called Values in Action Strengths Analysis. And this is a free tool you can do online. It's available to everybody. It's part of the Positive Psychology Foundation. That will give you 24 strengths that have been universally recognized throughout the world, so not just in the UK or even just in America, across lots of different countries.
Vincent's doing it.
And those 24, my biggest ally right here, those 24 strengths, the research shows that if you use 4 of those top strengths in a day-to-day work environment, you will feel happier, more engaged, and more included in what you're doing.
Interesting. And that's how I feel when I have a good day, probably, but I didn't know it.
Yeah, exactly.
And equally, when I have a bad day, I'm probably not using my strengths. So let's talk about women. International Women's Day. The McKinsey report, Women in the Workplace. You've read it. I haven't. Give me the York Notes, the exec summary.
I think that there is still work to be done, and I think there will always be work to be done. We find generally, and I don't know if this is in the latest McKinsey report, when I did my thesis on how do we keep women in technology and get them into senior roles, I think it was around 17% of women leave the technology industry at that mid-level. And so McKinsey talk about this ladder and the broken rung of women just fall off in that they choose, or they just decide to just step away from their career, from the technology industry, and as a result, you're not then getting women coming through into those very senior careers. So in that respect, it's what do you do about it? And I think it's, again, on a neurological level, the research shows that if you see women and men, this isn't just about women, because I think what's really important here is that we are celebrating International Women's Day, and we want to include more women in senior roles and move them up the career ladder. But it's about the allies and about the champions, whether that's male, female, transgender, pangender, etc. But what we need to focus on is the more we see women talking about advocacy and resilience building within their own environment, so within Google, within London, within this country, on a psychological level, that has more of a profound positive impact on keeping them engaged and thinking, I can continue and I can work in this environment, rather than naturally falling off, which is what tends to happen.
Excellent. Now help me out. I can see the inclusivity bingo cards on the floor, and it reminds me of a recent offsite we had with the team. Advocacy was something I needed to work on. Give me some tips.
I think what's really important is, again, to understand the individual in terms of their strengths, their values, the talent they bring, who they are, and the way that they work, and advocating for that individual based on what those strengths, values, talents are. So the more diverse a workforce is, the more productive, but the more it's profitable, whether it's successful, whatever KPI you want to put around it, the more successful that company will be. So advocating for women or for groups who are less likely to represent themselves is a huge part of going back to I can see my boss or my boss's boss is doing that for me. And we shouldn't underestimate how powerful that actually is. I mean, we say we should do it and it's a good thing to do it. But what the science is proving is that on a psychological level, if you do that, if you advocate, if you champion, if you speak up, if you show somebody who's done a piece of work and someone else takes the credit for it, and this often happens with extroverts and introverts, whether they're male or female, the introverts in the room will go, yeah, that was my piece of work, I should say something. But their style of communication is not to do that. So it needs advocation, and it needs championship, and it needs allies.
And how can you set yourself, if you are one of those types of people, how do you set yourself up to sort of trigger a slightly different behavior in the meeting? Because you are wanting the advocacy, you want to give the advocacy, but it's not always going to happen. How do you create the moments and the techniques to allow it to happen more naturally if it's not your sort of habitat?
I think it's a two-way street. So as people within your team need to say, need to communicate, I want to be championed, and I want that help, and I want that speaking up for me. If you don't do that, your manager or the person running that meeting, whoever that is, they don't know. So the first very basic thing is to say, look, I am a shy person, or I'm not somebody that feels confident enough to speak up. I want you to do that. This is what I did. This is, the piece of work or whatever it is that you're advocating. For the team leader, project leader, or the person running the meeting, again, it's going in with that intention to actually say, right, when I do this meeting, I want to make sure I am actively not just doing it as something that may or may not happen. I am actively advocating, championing, and I'm thinking about the various roles in the inclusivity bingo and being really purposeful in bringing that into my meeting. The other thing that I do, and some people think I'm bonkers for doing this, and some people love it, is I actually use music.
We'll take a vote after the idea. I know which camp I'm in.
I like to use music, both for myself as an individual.
This bit's fine, wait.
And within a team meeting, especially if you're doing a really big pitch, a really big, important meeting. Some people like it, some people don't. Most of the people that know me now know this is what they're going to get. So they're like, actually, we do love it. Or they realize the effect. I will play the Top Gun theme tune when they're going into battle and they're going off that aircraft carrier. And remember, this is somebody, when you're looking at our hero here, who's had a pretty tough time leading up to his, how do I go and fight and do my thing? So he's, we're feeling for the underdog here. And then how do we go and take that and make that work? And the music, for me, is a trigger. So I do this, when I'm going into myself. My iPods are in and I'm listening to it. And I did it on the tube this morning. And people are looking at me on the tube and I'm sitting there going, yes. Or I'm doing a meditation. This wasn't today, but this was yesterday, because we had a big think tank here yesterday. And I'm doing the breathing on the tube. And most people actually probably don't care. And it's me feeling a bit maybe subconscious. But having that music, for me as an individual and within my room with the team, gets everybody like, yes, we're going to do this. Now, that happens on a kind of motivational level. But again, on a psychological level, the rhythm of that music, the beat, and this is known, more so for probably Beethoven than Top Gun, that it does instill brainwaves. It changes the neurocircuits that then affect your whole nervous system, as well as your thinking and what you're talking about. And so it can go both ways. You can empower and lift up, or you can use a meditative style, whether it's music or a meditation app, to just really focus and bring that in. And I run a masterclass for women particularly to do more speaking, so how to do public speaking, particularly in technology conferences. And a big part of that is the confidence. It's how do you actually build the confidence? And there's a piece of music that I use myself in the various conferences and presentations I do that just helps me visualize doing it, thinking it through, or even when I'm planning what I'm going to talk about. And what then happens is, again, this habit-forming situation. When I was playing it this morning. My husband came in and told me to turn it down because it was at top volume.
What is the piece of music?
This is a piece that's on Spotify, and it's in the chill, which actually sort of sounds different to what it is. I can't remember what the actual name of the song is. I can share it.
Your recently played list must be very unusual and eclectic.
But it has drums in it that go bang, and that's like, that's me landing my first message. Another, and I'm like, yes, I'm on stage and my hair looks fabulous. And then the next one
Which it does. Lots of nodding.
But this goes back to when my brain now hears that piece of music. Because I'm going to be really honest, I was shattered last night. We had an amazing think tank. I got home really late, and I'm really excited about doing the talk, but I need my brain to kick in to those specific areas to start bringing up that stimulation. When I play that music, Nurampura, there you go, okay. Nurampura, and I'll share the specific link on Spotify. See, again, it's going back into my brain. When you don't think about it, it comes out. To really get you into that mood and that habit. So
you're talking about mood and habit, and we talk about flow quite a lot in this business, which is, how can you get into that space where nothing else matters, and you're gently concentrating on a single task, and you're having a great time, frankly. How do you get into that space more frequently?
So again, it's about being intentional to want to get into that state in the first place.
Right.
So rather than, quite often what I used to find before I studied this is I would start a project and feel really alive with it. And you get to that stage, we've all been there, where you just feel, time has no meaning, and you can, type away or code away or whatever it is, you're just doing it and you're in flow. It's about being intentional to get yourself into that flow and into that flow state. So again, it's thinking at the beginning of a piece of work that you're doing, or when you're sitting down at your computer, or whatever the situation is, to intentionally say, right, I'm going to really focus on this, whatever it is. And again, build behind that the pattern, whether it's music or meditation, that starts to get you into that state, especially if you're not feeling as energized as you want to be. Because quite often what happens is once you start it, you do get into flow, but getting into flow is that step. So being intentional about that with your breathing, meditation, and this is, 5 minutes on a Headspace app. This is not sitting cross-legged, on a mat in front of some fireplace and beautiful candle set and doing, because, the alpha females and males among us go, yes, I'm going to do meditation. It has to be 4 hours long and I'm going to be completely immersed in this. 5 minutes will affect how you start thinking, and it gets you into that state of flow.
Love it. We're going to open up to questions in a second. I'm going to have one more question. So imagine you are mentoring yourself.
Yeah.
Your, 21-year-old self as you're entering the workplace. What would you be saying to that person in today's world?
Yeah.
And how they should conduct themselves, and how they should meet their goals, reach their dreams, do what they want to do? What would you say?
So we talk a lot about passion and finding your passion, especially when you're starting your career. And I think that the reality is sometimes it's not as easy to know what your passion is or find it straight off. So if you're coming into it as a 21-year-old self, thinking, what do I want to be doing in my life, in my career and business world, particularly, putting time into trying to find what that passion is. Now, for me, that came very naturally because I knew I wanted to be in media, but for a lot of people, and it changes throughout your life, so I think it's actually taking the time to invest in yourself and think about these things. And what's so brilliant today is there is so much information that wasn't around when I was 21. It was only what was on television, and I was taking my cues and inspiration from Dynasty in Dallas, and I'm going to go and run an oil baron company or whatever it might be. Whereas now you can find so much more information around different jobs, around the education requirements of those jobs, and find find the tribe that supports you in what it is you're looking to do, or that seems to be in an area, and try it, because it's okay to change your mind. So I think what is really important to say is, although I was very intentional from a very young age, it's about giving yourself space and time to reflect, and then finding the right people to support you with that. And I know, we've talked today about champions, mentors. Mentors are so important. What I would add to that is find a mentor who has gone through something that you are either going through and need help with, or is in a job or position that is where you think you want to be specifically. Because then it goes back to this, if she did it or he did it, then I know I can do that, because I'm literally, lucky enough to have your time and talk to you, and you're sharing that with me. And you're sharing insights and energy as well as experience, which again is then building, that part of your brain that is the focus part, the emotional, I can do this, build my confidence part, to then go into the job and the career that you're looking to build.
Great advice. So, question. Yeah, oh, hello. Good enthusiasm. Lou.
Hi, Saleha. Thanks so much for that. On the topic of mentors, I want to talk a little bit about the topic of sponsors.
Yep.
And sponsors that you might have had throughout your career. How did you find those sponsors in an authentic way?
I pestered the hell out of them until they gave me any time, or that is kind of true. But also, I was very clear about what I wanted. And I think this is, today it's so easy to contact people, whether it's through LinkedIn or, people that you may not have actually physically connected with, but you really want to talk to. And again, this goes back to that intention of, I need help with, or I know you have done X, can you help me with that? And that then gives them, and there's very few people that I know, and certainly people that I have contacted throughout my career, where I've been quite specific, whether it says, I need to build my confidence, or whether it is, before I came into the job I'm doing now, I'd like some advice about going into this next company and this next role. You've done something similar, and I have a mentor who is 15 years older than me, who helped me decide, is this the right move for me as a job? And because it's something she'd done herself. So I think finding people that have done specifically what you are looking for help with, and being intentional about asking why you want their help. Otherwise, people get bombarded, especially good people, they get bombarded with requests, and sometimes it's just not physically possible to go back to everybody and say, I'd love to, but I can't. If you say, I'm after this, I think you're much more likely to get a response to that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alia. I just one question, because you were talking about intention, and intention is like dedication and focus and commitment to something. But today, with like all the information that we get, where we can feel like overwhelmed, because you shared like a link, then a Spotify link, and then something else, and then something else. So how do you curate the content to kind of like just get exactly what you need, just to make sure that like you don't spend your time chasing information and you actually get value from it?
Vincent, that is a brilliant question, and I would just like to put a shout out to one of my biggest allies right here in the room right now. It was Vincent who actually set this up, so thank you. And we didn't rehearse the question, by the way. It is a really good point, because you can find you become so overwhelmed with so many apps, so many different playlists or news feeds or messages or whatever. What I did, and again it goes back to investing the time, is I went into Spotify, and when I found or heard pieces of music, I kept them within a playlist I built myself, but there are only 5 songs in that playlist. And so I know that I keep going back to that, and I don't even look at anything else yet. Likewise I use Insight Timer as a meditation app, and there are thousands of meditations that range from guided meditations with music to people just talking in a blog style. And I spent time, a Saturday morning, saying, I need, and this is exactly what I have on my Insight Timer list, something around confidence, something around energy, something around coming down and relaxing and emptying my mind so I can sleep better, because I tend to be very wired. And I have just 5 or 6, and I keep going back to them. And it goes back to this habit then of you automatically reach for the same thing, rather than hundreds of different songs or hundreds of different playlists. And I think that is the thing, it's being focused again on the content that works for you, that you're using within these apps, or the person or people that you're going to. So I know, there are 3 people that I will consistently go and ask advice for, and that's it. I don't, at this point, need to expand beyond that. I might do later, but rather than go to 20 and then try and deal with 20 WhatsApp messages or 20 different streams of thinking, I've got 3 very trusted people that I will limit my time and focus with. And then I'm also respecting their time and energy, because I'm then taking deep dive rather than doing a broad view on something.
It's a great question. I happen to be with a friend of mine who's in a similar field to you, and only last week he was asking the same question, because he's thinking about if all of our products and services are increasingly being built around engagement, which can often be endless, how can you be more deliberate about your journey that you're trying to have with that product or service? And in the old days, of course, it was the newspaper, and you started at the front and you went to the back, and that was the end, and then you were sort of very happy and content, and you put it in the recycling box, and you moved on to your next task. But it's increasingly hard to do when it's this endless cascade. So he was advocating just being much more deliberate about what you are trying to get out of the thing that you're doing. So if you're going to iTunes, or if you're going to Spotify, or if you're searching the web or looking at a newspaper online, just be very clear about how long you're going to spend on it, what you're trying to get out of it. And it's okay to do the scan of the Daily Mail homepage if that's your little sort of digital cigarette break, but just make sure it doesn't become your life. So set your timer and then move on. Sammy.
There's so many questions, it's great.
Hi, I'm Sammy from the Partnerships team. Thank you so much for your time. Super fascinating, and I've learned quite a bit. Going back to the concept of intent and habit forming, and specifically as it relates to inclusivity, can you dig in a little bit further as to how you actually, and can you, build intent within an organization around inclusivity? Because oftentimes we listen to these conversations and you walk away feeling really inspired, but you can't help but ask the question, but how? How can I do that?
Yeah. I think, again, it goes back to realizing what you can do in your lunch break, talking to somebody in the coffee area, or is as important as the big initiatives that happen. And so we need the big initiatives as well, like I Am Remarkable, for example. But I think it is, in terms of, we change culture by being that change. It's a bit of a cliche, but it's true. So if you set to give yourself some time to talk to somebody in the lunch queue and say, hey, how's your day going? What part of the business do you work in? And if you then focus that particularly on people who aren't as well represented in your teams or in your projects, that's building that up, bottom up as well as top down. I think the other thing is to realize we have to focus time and energy ourselves in in finding people to be part of that, because often people will shy away if they're underrepresented in the first place. So it's being, okay, how do I do this in the lunch queue? How do I do this, in a meeting where there's someone that I've not met before? And being more aware of that. So if somebody of color or somebody from an ethnic minority background, intentionally go and talk to that person and invite them to the initiatives that you know about, or even a coffee or a lunch, to talk about what their experience is and build that up. And that's how you're doing it, from grassroots up as well as within the wider, bigger initiatives that happen.
So being inclusive, Sammy, you're going to say something else?
I was going to say thank you.
Does that answer your question?
Yes.
We should go to the Dory to make sure that...
We don't have anything on the Dory yet.
We've got nothing in the Dory.
If you do want something on the Dory, it's go/IWD London Dory. Next question.
I have a very specific question for you around being too hard to yourself after, for example, presentations. So I think for me personally, I'm probably very critical to myself, and what I see is I'm a remarkable facilitator, that people are discouraged because they think they haven't been doing really well, although they might have been doing pretty well.
Yeah.
And they feel discouraged because they think like, oh, last time it didn't really work out for me, so like, why should I try again? How are you facing similar situations, or do you have advice about how to overcome this thought of or being too critical to yourself?
I think the first thing to say is that women particularly are super critical. Super, 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 super critical. But men are too. And so it's realizing, again, we are human, and that is part of trying to be the best we can be. So accept, first of all, that we may be very critical about ourselves. And by accepting that to begin with, you're then opening yourself to a situation to say, okay, let me take the emotion out of that now, and actually, what did I do? What did I achieve? Or let's talk that through again. And again, it's one of these situations where I found myself, I'll work and work and work and work and work, and then I'll get to the end of the week and I think, what have I achieved? What have I actually done? And I'm in a new job, so I'm in a super, show what I'm doing mode. And when I then start writing it up, or I, for myself, do a review of even my calendar, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I did that and I did this. And I think to do that for yourself and take that time to reflect is a really good thing and a habit to get into. But then again, it comes back to advocacy. And it comes back to saying, yeah, but remember, you are doing remarkable, and you're facilitating that. You did go to this meeting, and you also did this. And if we do that for each other, then that again helps us reflect back. Actually, yeah, you're right, I did. Because we're so fast on just moving on to the next thing, we're not coming back to reflect on what we've achieved. I think there will always be a super critical gene that we have when we're very passionate about doing a really good job. And it's trying to then build, again, a tribe around that where, and I had this myself, one of the ladies that works with me in acceleration, this was sort of 7:30 last Friday night in the office, and we were the only two there in our little bit. There was lots of other WPP people there, but in our little bit, we were the only two people there. And everyone's working remotely as well, obviously. And she said, how's it going? It's been 5 weeks in the new job. And I'm like, yeah, so I've done this and this and this, but I want to do more. And she just turned around to me and she said, Saleha, it's been 5 weeks. And just having someone say that, even to me with, the experience and, the longevity I've had in working was like, oh yeah, it is. So that sort of sharing, advocacy, champion, reinforcing, again, it's realizing how powerful that is, and to be doing that on a positive basis. It's that positive mindset where you are building each other up, not saying, you're brilliant when you're not, but actually just reflecting and observing that, yes, you have done X, Y, Z, and sometimes it needs someone else to point that out for you. And I'm sure with the facilitation that you've done in your I Am Remarkable sessions, the people have loved it. Sometimes they tell you, and sometimes they don't, only because they might be shy or less communicative. But I know, I'm absolutely certain that people were going, that was fantastic, even if they don't always voice it. So if someone does voice it, that helps hugely. So speak up is the point.
The question I ask myself in those situations, and life can be challenging, can't it? And you won't always perform your best. And I can clearly remember a lot of moments in my life which have gone terribly. And the question, you can't change history, so it is what it is. And, you can be emotionally attached, but, a good sleep, the right food, some exercise, whatever it is that gets you into a more positive mindset, it can't be changed.
Yeah.
And then the next thing I do have to ask myself is, what did I learn? And then, that is, did I prepare appropriately? Did I rehearse it properly? Did I spend enough time on it? Could I have got some advocacy and some help from elsewhere? I think once you get into that mindset, you're thinking forward and you think, how can I make it better? And then the next question is, right, when can I next do it if it's a really daunting task? And then how can I embrace it, enjoy it, and make sure I've taken my learnings and applied it to the next experience?
We've got a question from the Dory quickly.
Yes.
It's from Grant, who is sat over there, but I'll read it out. Thanks, Grant. Really enjoyed the ideas that have been shared. Do you have any specific examples of cases where people have been good allies to help you, and what made them great allies?
Okay, this is going to sound really pretentious, but it's true and brilliant. One of the best allies that I've had in my career was James Cameron. James Cameron, the Oscar award-winning film director of Avatar, Titanic, etc. And the story goes, I was at the IBC show, which Justin and I have done, a big show in Amsterdam, media and entertainment world, as Chris will know very well. 70,000 people attending from all over the world, and it's kind of like the CES of media and entertainment on the technology side. And a number of years back, James Cameron was being awarded a Lifetime Achievement Award, and he was coming to pick it up 3 years later because he was busy, but also because he was then trying to launch what was then his 3D technology business in Europe, so the timing worked. And I remember talking to the president of the show and saying to him, at the time I was running an industry magazine, digital magazine, and an event group at IBC. And I remember talking to the president of the IBC show, and I said, do you mind if I try and contact him for an interview? And he said, fill your boots, go, yeah, try, but he's very busy, so it just probably won't happen. And it goes back to this intention of, I'm going to get that interview. I may be this tiny little thing compared to the Telegraph and the Guardian and Channel 4 and ITV. I mean, it's the media world, so anybody was there. And I remember sitting at City Airport in London, trying to speak to his press office, who were based in New York. Finally got the name of somebody, and they said, okay, look, he's staying at such and such hotel, and if you can find him and speak to his posse, then you can see if you can get an interview. So I camped out in this hotel. I can't say which one, obviously. It was very nice. And I sat in this hotel lobby, I think it was about 9 hours, waiting for him to turn up with what was his CMO, his press office, this whole entourage sort of came in, so you couldn't miss him. He goes off, obviously, and I talked to his press officer and said, I'd really like to do an interview. And I was wearing a badge for the Olympics, because I'd just come out of the Olympic Games, London 2012 Olympics. And she looked at the badge and she said, you're involved in the Olympics? And I said, she said, he's trying to get involved in the Olympics from a 3D perspective. Can you help? I'm like, absolutely. Of course I can help. Now, to be fair, I could. But what happened was I managed to get 5 minutes with him at a cocktail party. So she said, look, come to the cocktail party at the show tomorrow. You'll get 5 minutes, and he will decide whether or not he will do the interview. So I go to this cocktail party, and again, it's right. Intention is I've got to be so on point. I've got to be really ready for this. And, I've got 5 minutes, probably less than, to get him. So I get my 5 minutes at something like 10 past 2 in the morning, and I've been there since 9 o'clock. And when I talk it all through with him, and he said, okay, I like your energy. I'm going to do it. And I'm like, okay, great, fantastic. So he says, talk to my press officer. So we set this interview up, and then the next day I get a call, and he says, the press officer said he's not doing the interview. He's not going to go ahead. I'm crestfallen. And I think, okay, he said, he's going to turn up at your drinks event for a very small event that we were doing at this big show, and you can give him the award that he thought he was going to get 3 years ago. Now, what they didn't realise was that the award he was getting was the big, proper Oscar-type award from the IBC show, not an award that my company was giving. So I send out our marketing director at the time. I said, right, here's my platinum card, my personal platinum card. Go and find something fabulous that I can give to James Cameron as an award to say thank you, lifetime achievement from us, so I can get this interview. So she runs off, she gets that. And she comes back with this beautiful Lalique sort of statue thing. So he comes to our event, and he basically said, I am just so impressed with the energy, creativity of this whole team behind what was this tiny little company that, you know, hence why I've come today, etc. A year later, he came back to the show and he said he would do 2 interviews. And one was with The Guardian and the other was with us. And what happened at the time was I took one of our film students. So this was a guy from Poland who was a film student, and he was going around the IBC show with me, and we were doing interviews with people on the floor. And I said to him, right, we've got a big interview today. Remember, he's a film student. We've got a big interview today. So you've got to be on point, be ready for it. And he was like, yes, boss, well, you know, whatever you need, whatever you need. So, who are you interviewing? We're interviewing James Cameron. And he's like, I'm a film student. I'm here from Poland on a scholarship. I'm going to film, he's holding the camera, James Cameron. I'm like, yes, James Cameron. We go and do this interview. It's on YouTube. It's actually in his bathroom. I mean, that's how serious this was in terms of, you know, I have 5 minutes and let's do it. And this poor guy was so nervous as this film student trying to hold this camera. Well, it was a big camera then. And he's literally like this. And I will remember this for the rest of my life. And James Cameron came over to him and he said, so what have you got here? What's this camera? What are you working on? How do you find it? What lens? And of course, the student suddenly goes into it's X, Y, Z, etc., etc. And he went, yeah, great. Ready? And of course, he's there and he's like, absolutely. And this is an example of somebody who is so brilliant and creative in his industry, in his films, in his whole awards, etc., who recognized in myself, in my team, in this fantastic film student, just creativity and energy, and just lifted them up. And I think it was just one of the most beautiful stories that I just will never forget in terms of, for me, what I was trying to do, somebody quite long in the tooth in my career already, this young student who was so excited but so nervous, and he just took them and lifted them. And he, you know, had the time and purpose to do that. And the experience that that's had for myself and for that film student will forever last. So, you know, it was a wonderful guy and an amazing experience, but the effects of that are huge, absolutely huge.
And I think that's a wonderful story for us to end on. Saleha Williams, thank you so much for joining us.